All right, so on Friday, March 31st, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services announced it is issuing policy guidance to remove the requirement that the civil surgeon's signature on the medical form I-693, that's taking your medical, it's a report of the immigration medical examination and vaccination record, what everyone knows is taking the medical, going to the immigration doctor. If it used to be dated more than 60 days from the time the application was filed, then your underlying application for an immigration benefit was denied. That has now changed. For a little background, non-citizens applying for certain immigration benefits while in the United States must go to an immigration doctor who fills out the form I-693 to show they are free from any conditions that would render them inadmissible under the health-related grounds of the Immigration and Nationality Act. Currently, USCIS considers a completed form I-693 medical form from the immigration doctor to retain its value for 2 years after the date the civil surgeon signed the form, as long as the date of the civil surgeon's signature is no more than 60 days before the applicant filed the application for the underlying immigration benefit, which is your adjustment of status. This is commonly referred to as the 60-day rule. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic and related processing delays, USCIS has experienced delays in all aspects of operations, and applicants have also experienced difficulties beyond their control, including delays in completing the immigration medical examination. So in response, USCIS during COVID temporarily waived the requirement that the civil surgeon sign the form I-693, your medical record, no more than 60 days before the applicant files the underlying adjustment application. Now USCIS is removing that requirement permanently. Applicants and attorneys have consistently expressed concern that this requirement is confusing and necessitates RFEs to be issued for otherwise valid medical forms. So now the medical forms are valid for 2 years and no RFEs will be required as long as the medical was taken within 2 years at the time of the approval of the adjustment application. The guidance is effective immediately. It applies to all medical forms I-693 associated with applications for adjustment of status pending as of March 31st, 2023, regardless of when the application was filed or when the civil surgeon signed the medical forms. The Department of State published its final rule on March 28th, raising most non-immigrant visa fees and the fee for border crossing cards for Mexican citizens over the age of 15. New fees from the State Department will go into effect May 30th, 2023. The fee changes are implemented by the rule are: the application processing fee for a B2 non-immigrant visa fee will be raised from $160 to $185. The application processing fee for H's, L's, O's, P's, Q's, and R's non-immigrant visas, they're going to be raised from $190 to $205. The fee for the E visa, that's your investor visa, that fee is going to be raised to $315 from $205. And the processing fee for border crossing cards for Mexican citizens over the age of 15 will be raised to $185 from $160. The Biden administration is now going to allow immigrants seeking benefits to mark their gender identity without needing their documentation to match. The news release posted by U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services on March 31st said the update to the immigration benefits policy is meant to clarify that immigrants do not need to submit proof of their gender identity when requesting to change their gender marker, except for those submitting a Form N-565, which is submitted by those applying for a replacement naturalization certificate or citizenship document. The release also states that the only gender markers available on their forms and documents are male and female, but the Department of Homeland Security is working to add an additional gender marker of X for another or unspecified gender identity. The clarification came on Transgender Day of Visibility. About a dozen states have enacted laws that ban gender-affirming care for minors, and the American Civil Liberties Union reports that 430 bills have been introduced in state legislatures during this legislative session that target LGBTQ individuals. Irina Quiones, executive director of the Texas nonprofit organization Doctors for Change, define gender-affirming care as judgment-free, individualized care oriented toward understanding and appreciating a person's gender. Providers often work with counselors and family members to ensure they have everything they need to navigate the healthcare system. Under the gender-affirming model of care, more time is spent allowing kids to socially transition instead of focusing on medical treatment. A social transition consists of the steps a child takes to affirm their identity. Leading healthcare organizations, including the American Psychiatric Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, and others agree, and they say gender-affirming care is the best way to provide care for transgender children. And transgender people make up a considerable portion of the population of the United States. Over 1.6 million adults and youths identify as transgender in the United States. And the takeaway from all of this is you can now check off male, female, or X if you are something other than male or female, or you don't want to even say what you are. On March 30th, the Census Bureau reported the number of immigrants nearly tripled in the nation's 20 most populous counties from 2021 to 2022 as immigration returned to pre-pandemic levels nationally. But the data showed that many of these counties are still losing residents to suburbs and other regions of the country and are feeling the brunt of the nation's low birth rate. Los Angeles County in California, Cook County, which includes Chicago, Illinois, and the boroughs of Brooklyn and Queens in New York all lost population, but the loss was much smaller than in 2021. And the census data shows that metro areas in the Sun Belt, including Phoenix, Houston, Dallas, and Tampa, continue to draw a large share of Americans who relocated. And we need to keep in mind the pandemic had an impact as well. The figures cover the 12 months ending on June 30th, 2022, when the virus was hitting one of its lethal peaks. Here are some of the biggest takeaways from the new data. Altogether, the nation's 20 largest counties gained more than 300,000 new residents between July 2021 and July 2022 through international immigration. For some counties, such as San Diego, Miami, and King County in Washington, which includes Seattle, immigration stabilized the population numbers, which otherwise would have decreased. For counties like Los Angeles, Brooklyn, New York, and Fulton counties in Atlanta, the decline slowed. For example, Los Angeles lost 90,000 residents in 2022, compared with 180,000 in 2021. Brooklyn's population fell by 47,000 in 2022 after falling by 82,000 in 2021. And many newcomers were drawn to big cities with more liberal immigration laws and long-standing immigrant enclaves. Theodore Moore, vice president of the New York Immigration Coalition, told the New York Times organization estimates that 50,000 migrants arrived in the New York metro area last year from countries such as Venezuela, Colombia, Haiti, and Cameroon, largely seeking asylum, and that another 20,000 Ukrainian refugees have also fled to New York City. Kenneth Johnson, a demographer at the University of New Hampshire, said because the country was aging and experiencing low fertility rates even before the emergence of COVID, the numbers point toward immigration as a key driver of future growth. That puts pressure on the country to integrate newcomers into the job market, housing, and schools. If places are going to grow, he noted, it's immigration that's going to help. The takeaway here is immigrants help the population of the United States grow. Without immigrants, our population would dwindle, which would directly affect the workforce in the U.S. I just did a TikTok video about immigrants in the United States. Someone wrote and said that people are running away from the United States. So I looked it up. I looked up the numbers. And there are 50 million immigrants living in the United States. That's 15% of the country's entire population. It is by far the largest immigrant population of any country in the world. The second closest is Germany with 13 million immigrants. And now a growing number of Chinese immigrants are crossing into the United States without papers, often taking difficult journeys through several countries and modes of transport and using social media as their guide. Ian Johnson, a senior fellow with the Council on Foreign Relations, says he thinks what we're seeing now are people who are more middle class, who just feel the opportunities are diminishing and that the political situation has just become a lot riskier. And so they're finding any method by hook or crook to get out of China. The United States Customs and Border Protection reported that in the past 5 months, at least 4,300 Chinese undocumented migrants have been apprehended crossing the southern border, which amounts to more than double the number for all the previous year. One immigrant spoke anonymously to MSNBC about his experience, saying he feared staying in China after speaking out against government corruption. Fearing further retribution after being jailed twice, he fled, following instructions left by those before him on Chinese social networking apps. Detailed guides, videos, and maps helped him make the journey all the way from China to the United States. He said, "There's so much information, trust me, step by step on what to do." He said his journey took weeks and he traveled thousands of miles on planes, buses, boats, motorcycles, and on foot. Some social media posts even advised migrants to cross in California rather than in the South, as stricter immigration policies could mean worse treatment on arrival. Another man who left his family behind to make the initial journey said he has heard of others having to pay people for access to information like where to stay along the way and where it's best to cross over. He said the price of that information can range from a few thousand to tens of thousands of dollars. So, I mean, everybody, I've seen people trying to cross. We're now China. I've seen Russians, Ukrainians, everyone from South America, Europeans, Africans, just about everybody is, because Mexico is almost visa-free. Almost every country you can go to Mexico visa-free. So people are just flooding into Mexico and trying to cross over. On Friday, more than 60 asylum-seeking members of a Chinese Christian church who were detained last week in Thailand flew to the United States. Thai police on Wednesday said the 63 members of the Shenzhen Holy Reformed Church, also known as the Mayflower Church, would be deported within a week, likely to a third country. The U.S. Embassy has declined comment, but was involved, along with representatives of the United Nations Refugee Agency, in talks with Thai officials about the matter. The church members, who have been in Thailand since last September, were arrested last week in the seaside city of Pattaya for overstaying their visas. This was in Thailand. And the Thai authorities fined them. And then the Thai authorities took them to Bangkok, where they were detained in jail. Bob Fu, president of China Aid, a Texas-based Christian human rights organization, said finally the group arrived in Dallas, Texas on Friday evening. Fu said in a text message that also thanked the United States and Thai officials and activists. China Aid welcomes the landing of the persecuted Chinese Mayflower Church to freedom in America, and welcome to Texas. Christian church organizations have been working to resettle them in Texas, lobbying for their admittance to the United States and offering to host them. The church members have said they faced unbearable harassment in China. Christians in China are legally allowed to worship only in churches affiliated with Communist Party-controlled religious groups. But for decades, the authorities largely tolerated independent, unregistered house churches. They have tens of millions of worshipers, possibly outnumbering those in the official group. But in recent years, house churches have come under heavy pressure, with many prominent ones shut down. Prior to their arrival in Thailand, the Mayflower Church members fled to South Korea's Jeju Island in October 2019 and stayed there for nearly 3 years. They decided to leave after it became clear they had no prospect for refuge there. And how ironic, since Texas is trying to pass all of these immigration laws to find immigrants in Texas and deport them from a state level. But they welcome these refugees from China, but Texas, ironically, is not welcoming refugees crossing the border from Mexico. U.S. citizens who are sponsoring family members to come to the United States are seeking to intervene in a case over a key immigration program that's been challenged in court by several Republican-led states. At the center of the case is the humanitarian parole program that provides a way for migrants from Nicaragua, Venezuela, Haiti, and Cuba seeking to come to the United States to do so without taking the dangerous journey to the U.S.-Mexico border. Among the requirements migrants must meet is obtaining a sponsor in the United States. The use of the humanitarian parole program has become a key part of the Biden administration's broader strategy to try to stem the flow of migrants to the United States southern border. President Joe Biden has repeatedly touted the program and attributed a recent drop in border crossings to it, among other efforts. But in late January, Republican-led states filed a lawsuit against the humanitarian parole program, arguing that administration that the Biden administration exceeded its authority in its use of the program and requesting the court to block it. The Justice Department is expected to defend the program. Now, U.S. citizens who are sponsoring family members, among others, to come to the United States under the humanitarian program are getting involved in the case to defend their interests and the public benefits of the program, the filing says. On March 29th, the Justice Action Center, along with RAICES, RAICES, and UCLA's Center for Immigration Law and Policy, submitted a court filing on behalf of the 7 citizens. Esther Sung, legal director at Justice Action Center, said they wanted to illustrate how these programs are being used by ordinary Americans in the United States. She said, "I think our interveners demonstrate the breadth and range of types of people who can and want to engage with the immigration system." Valerie Leveas, a Florida school teacher, is one of the 7 interveners trying to bring her brother and nephew, who are living in dangerous conditions in Haiti, to the United States. Other interveners include Frances Aruz, who's trying to reunite with her Nicaraguan husband, Eric Sipe, who plans to sponsor a friend from Nicaragua, and Nan Langowitz, who's sponsoring family members of a Venezuelan human rights advocate. The Biden administration has increasingly relied on parole to admit eligible migrants to the United States and drive down border crossings. The United States is committed to accepting up to 30,000 migrants per month from Nicaragua, Cuba, Haiti, and Venezuela, who have been arriving in large numbers under the parole program, while turning back those who cross the border unlawfully under a COVID-era border restriction. We have an update on the Rochester Gonzalez family, whose story we have been following and who has appeared twice as guests on our show. For the past 5 years, Jason Rochester and his 10-year-old son, Ashton, have been living apart from Ashton's mother, Jason's wife of 16 years, Cecilia Gonzalez. The 2 met at work in the United States. Gonzalez now lives in Mexico after voluntarily leaving the United States in 2018 out of fear of deportation. During Gonzalez's time away, 9-year-old Ashton endured a battle with cancer. He and Rochester see Gonzalez once or twice a year during the summer. Rochester is supporting the American Families United Act, H.R. 1698, a bill that would allow U.S. citizens to request a case-by-case waiver for non-citizen family members to live in the United States. If the bill passes, it would grant immigration judges and officials authority to weigh the impact that family separation would have on a United States citizen if their undocumented spouse or child were denied a visa or received a deportation order, and to grant these families relief. On March 22nd, Jason and Ashton were on Capitol Hill for the reintroduction of the American Families United Act to the House of Representatives. They joined Congresswoman Veronica Escobar, the chief sponsor of the legislation, who said, fundamentally, this bill is about ensuring that families can be together and participate in the American dream, and that the United States government does not continue to stand in their way. According to American Families United, a volunteer-led organization of U.S. citizens with family members who could not secure lawful status because of eligibility bars, an estimated 700,000 U.S. citizens, 700,000 Americans have experienced family separation as their spouse was refused a visa or was deported from the United States. According to recent statistics, more than 22 million people, 1 in 20 people in the United States of America, live in mixed status households. Some 10.6 million U.S. citizens, including 5.8 million U.S. citizen children, live in households with someone who is undocumented. And nearly 1.7 million U.S. citizens have a spouse who is undocumented. Legislation like the American Families United Act would provide relief and certainty to these families. A bill died in the House in 2022 after it ran out of time to pass. According to the group American Families United, the bill has also received pushback from some Republicans in Congress as well. If it passes this time, relatives with a criminal history or those considered to pose a security threat would not be allowed to return to the United States. Rochester said the bill's latest version has more bipartisan support and bigger backing from large organizations. I will continue to update you on the progress of the American Families United Act H.R. 1698 and the case of Cecilia Gonzalez. I really hope it passes. I have another update on one of our former Bradshaw Live guests, Reina Abdelmaid. Reina is an Egyptian-American woman from Queens, New York, who took the experience of a man trying to rip her hijab off her head when she was 15 years old to training in self-defense and eventually creating her organization, Malika, a global movement advocating against gender and hate-based violence. Reina was also a finalist at L'Oreal Women of Worth and served on the board of Amnesty International. And now we have Reina Ramadan news. This year, Ramadan began on Thursday, March 23rd, and lasts until Friday, April 21st. It is a holy month of daytime fasting, introspection, and renewal for Muslims. During this month, the daily prayers become especially important. The calls to prayer typically last between 3 to 5 minutes and are called 5 times a day, with the first one starting before the sun rises. In Astoria, Queens, just in time for Ramadan, the mosques, Masjid Dar al-Dawa, Masjid al-Iman, Astoria Islamic Center, and Majd el-Ber received the neighborhood's first ever permits to broadcast calls to prayer from the street. The prayers being played outside of the mosques has been greeted with enthusiasm by the neighborhood Muslim community with little to no pushback. As far as I'm aware, it's the first time that any neighborhood has allowed this to happen, certainly in New York. Reina is the person who submitted applications on behalf of all 4 mosques to the local 114th precinct. She said that the permits will last until the end of Ramadan, but that she hopes and expects they will become permanent after that. Reina told thecity.com that the Astoria permits begin with the second prayer of the day at some time between noon and 1 p.m., and said she likened it to church bells, and that for Muslims, when we pray 5 times a day, it's really important for us to be able to hear the call to prayer. Today, according to the 2021 American Community Survey, estimates nearly 4,000 immigrants from Bangladesh, another 2,000 from Egypt, and more than 1,000 from Morocco live in Astoria, with many of them just a few blocks from one of these mosques. So congratulations to Reina, the Muslim community in Astoria, Queens. Happy Ramadan. Ramadan Mubarak. America's space agency has assembled its first moon squad in more than 50 years. On April 3rd, during a ceremony in Houston, NASA announced the crew boarding the next mission, Artemis 2, that includes 3 Americans and 1 Canadian. It's the first time someone from outside the United States joins the team. It's also the first time a woman and a person of color are assigned to a lunar mission. The mission commander, Reed Wiseman, will be joined by Victor Glover, an African-American naval aviator, Christina Cook, who holds the world record for the longest spaceflight by a woman, and Canada's Jeremy Hansen, a former fighter pilot and the crew's lone space rookie. Wiseman, Glover, and Cook all lived on the International Space Station. The 4 astronauts are expected to embark on a 10-day journey around the moon and back in November. If all goes well, NASA says it plans to land 2 astronauts on the moon in 2025. On April 5th, the crew appeared on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. When Colbert asked Christina Cook to explain what the overview effect is, she said, "The overview effect is when you're looking down on the Earth and see that the Earth as it exists with the whole universe in the background. You see the thin blue line of the atmosphere. And then when you're on the dark side of the Earth, you actually see this very thin green line that shows you where the atmosphere is." And then what she said really resonated with us as an immigration show.
And what you realize is every single person you know is sustained and inside of that green line, and everything else outside of it is completely inhospitable. You don't see borders, you don't see religious lines, you don't see political boundaries. All you see is Earth, and you see that we're way more alike than we are different.
And that resonates with us. Thanks for watching. For more Bradshaw Live, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.